All right, everybody. Welcome to Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard postgame from Lincoln Financial Field here in Philadelphia. A devastating loss, a different kind of devastating loss than the catastrophic choke job in Denver to the Broncos, but different reasons why this one feels so difficult for the Giants to stomach. You have a 38-20 defeat. That in and of itself, a second straight loss here. Giants fall to 0-5 on the road, and ultimately 2-6 on the season. And with all the injuries that they've suffered to top weapons, key players, and the fact that they were hanging by a thread already after an 0-3 start with Russell Wilson at quarterback, Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen now have a 5-20 record in their last 25 games going back to the start of the 2024 season. But on top of that, Cam Scadaboo's injury, disgusting, gruesome, really feel bad for him. Latest update on that here from the stadium is that he has already been scheduled for surgery tonight at a local hospital here in the Philadelphia area. So Scadaboo with a dislocated right ankle undergoing surgery immediately. If you were watching the game, you saw what happened. It was ugly. The players saw it on the field. Jackson Dart said he was, quote, devastated. He said, "That's my boy." Everybody feels terrible for him. On top of losing Malik Neighbors this season, now Cam Scadaboo, which obviously hurts in a lot of different ways. Energy-wise, Darius Slayton said that he's a unifying presence and on the team, both the youthful energy and just the way that he tries to galvanize the team, but also X's and O's wise, obviously what Dart and Scadaboo had been able to do with the Giants coming in. First of all, they were the number one team in rush attempts coming into this game against the Eagles. And not only that, but in the red zone, they were converting successfully. You even saw it today. They used Scadaboo out of the backfield as a receiver. He embarrasses a linebacker on the Eagles, Patrick Johnson, with a great route. And as a walk-in 18-yard touchdown catch from Dart to tie the game at 7-7 before everything comes apart in the second quarter for him and for the team. And that is what they're going to be missing here more than anything is you look at Scadaboo's stats this season as a runner, just gaining yards on an average carry. It wasn't anything special, but it was the physical nature that he was playing with, the fact that he also gave you something as a receiver. And then on top of that, the conversions in the red zone. That is where, even going back to last season in the last couple of years when Daniel Jones was running the team and the offense, they would move the ball between the 2 20-yard lines, like through the middle of the field, a fair amount with Daniel Jones as the quarterback. They just couldn't get in the end zone. And that's one thing that Dart Scadaboo as a combination had been able to do. And so that is the key element of, like, when you say, what do the Giants lose with this injury? I think that you have to start there. But my primary takeaway here on Talking Ball Postgame Live with Pat Leonard from Lincoln Financial Field here in Philadelphia. Welcome, everybody, all the diehards, all the regulars. And if you're new to our podcast and to our show, welcome. Thanks for being here. Please please subscribe. And if you want your comment or question answered first in the queue, you want to jump to the top, purchase a super chat or super sticker as Joel did. And Joel will be first up on our queue once I get to the questions. But to continue kind of my monologue here at the beginning to give you guys the lay of the land from postgame in the locker room, my main takeaway is today is the day that Jackson Dart officially became a Giant. And what I mean by that is he is looking around now. There's the injuries, but it's also the way the team played today. The fact that the defense gave up 276 yards rushing to the Eagles, two different 100-yard rushers, Saquon Barkley and Tank Bigsby, of all people. And Dart said it best. He's looking around and he says, "I'm trying to say this the right way." He's basically like talking to himself at the podium. He said, "I thought they really kind of dominated most of the game, and it's an embarrassing feeling. We've got to start figuring out ways to win because I hate losing. I'm not used to it. I'm not going to accept it. I'm not going to be okay with it. And we as a team can't be okay with it. We have to figure this out." But again, team is 5-20 since the start of the 2024 season under Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, 0-5 on the road this year. And really, this was just the first time that Jackson Dart, who is obviously very new to this, it's the first time that felt like he looked around and mustered the anger of, a promising player who can see how bad it's going to get or might get if he doesn't push back, if the team together collectively doesn't push back. He can see he didn't use this word, I'm using this word. He can see where the culture either is or goes when these games start to snowball. He even pointed out, like Brian Daboll said, there was no layover or hangover or any lingering issues from the Denver game. But Dart pointed out, he said, it's really frustrating. We have to do better as a whole, as a unit. And it's, he said, that was the wrong quote. Dart mentioned that it was especially frustrating because coming off of the Denver game, he really wanted to essentially wash it away. His quote was, it's frustrating because I felt confident coming into this game. I felt obviously extra motivated because of how things happened last week. And I really didn't want one to lead to another. I'm just disappointed that we lost. And so that is Dart, accurately assessing that the Giants had something really good going last week in Denver for 3 quarters. It all came apart in the fourth. And from his vantage point, he thinks troubling issues, whether it was their performance or as a combination of their performance, but also the way that their opponents are starting to attack them and figure them out, that he sees that where this can go. He sees that it did linger, and it's not about necessarily that they woke up this morning thinking about the Denver game. It's more about, okay, the issues that cost us the Denver game are now going to continue. And now that adversity that we're used to fighting back against becomes more difficult and more difficult with every blow that they take from their opponents. Like Kayvon Thibodeau said, he said with football, it's about 80% mindset and 20% physical skill and ability. But at some point, mindset isn't enough, and you got to go make the plays. So his point was, we can talk about how we're resilient and talk about how we're going to keep fighting. But if we can't make the plays on the field, it really doesn't matter how mentally tough we think we are or how excited we are, confident we are during the week with our game planning. Like if we're not making the plays, so what? And, that is, the run defense, obviously there are plenty of issues today, but the run defense is the thing to focus on today, because from a standpoint of being embarrassed and dominated and, let's say, being worried that these issues are going to continue, run defense and being out-muscled, out-physicaled, especially coming off 2 weeks ago when they just, imposed their physical will in plenty of that 34-17 win over the Eagles at home, it is a concern. I mean, you're going up against a Niners team that is far from perfect and missing key players next week. But, that's nothing. That's not a sure win. That's a tough team, a physical team, a team that if you're not ready to win the line of scrimmage for 4 quarters, you will lose. At Chicago after that, versus the Green Bay Packers after that, and then at the Lions, at the Patriots, and they don't have a bye until early December. That Patriots game is December 1st, and the Giants don't play. They don't have their bye essentially until the week of the weekend of the 8th. And then they finish with the Commanders and Vikings at home, the Raiders on the road, and the Cowboys at home. So it's starting to look dark down that tunnel for Jackson Dart and for the Giants. And we'll talk about the referees. If you saw, I posted on social media, Kayvon Thibodeau called it bullshit. He used the word bullshit to describe the catch-22 of, the officials trying not. They say they don't want to try to blow the whistle too early because they want the Eagles to be able to finish the play. But then on the flip side, they're ruling forward progress that quickly on a play where he forces a fumble from Jalen Hurts, right? So, he used that term, and then Brian Burns reminded Kayvon he could be fined for talking like that, and Kayvon then smirked and he said, sorry about that. There was a great call by the refs. So presumably he'll be hearing from the league, but I understand why he feels that way. I mean, I think that was clearly a play that if you're watching it, you don't hear a whistle and it doesn't look like Hurts is done playing the play, right? Now, watching in the moment, watching the officials running out and marking and stopping the play, they did stop the play or rule forward progress. Like to my eyes, sitting here live, without hearing, but that's the hard part about it. It's like you didn't hear the whistle then, but I did see them start ruling forward progress before the ball came out. So it didn't surprise me that they made the call eventually that they did. But I totally understand why the Giants are, super confused by this ruling and by the explanation, when especially as Kayvon said, there are certain ways that this play is officiated and how it's let go to a certain point for some reasons, as I have to plug in here, which I forgot to do beforehand. Need an IV or not IV, need an AV expert to keep me right. It's always one thing you forget, But so that play obviously was highly questionable, let's say. And then, the Darius Slayton offensive pass interference. Slayton said that, and I remember, I was thinking the same thing on the play. There was a play earlier in the game where Dart threw the ball up to Slayton with Quinyon Mitchell in single coverage, and they were both hand fighting. And Slayton felt like part of the reason he didn't make the play was that Mitchell kind of had his left arm pinned as he was trying to reach up for the ball. And so on the second, and there was no call, it was both ways, both guys hand fighting, no call. So on the play in the second half, when Dart threw it up to Slayton, he said, I was going to be damned if I was going to let him hold my arm down there. And so he felt like he was just freeing himself from Mitchell to make the catch and the play on what looked like a deep touchdown. And then in the end, he was confused. He just felt like they let it go both ways this time, especially when he felt like he got grabbed. And then on the second time, they don't let it go. They call it on him, and it cost him a touchdown. So I understand that. I mean, I always think calls like that are what it looks like versus what it actually is. It's just like in basketball. They always say, like, let's say someone's going up for a shot in the lane or a layup or a dunk. It's like if you swipe down trying to strip the ball out, if the ball goes straight down, the referee thinks you got it clean. And if the ball keeps going up in the air, more often than not, it means you got the guy's wrist or his hand. Therefore, they're going to call it, even if you actually did get the ball and no hand. And that was the way I viewed that play, was that it looked, with Slayton reaching his arm out and looking like he was pushing, like it was OPI. So I understood and kind of expected, based on what it looked like, that a flag was coming out. But when you see the replay and you see them both hand fighting, it's obviously tough to stomach. So the one thing I would say about that play is the Dart fumble being overturned to an incomplete pass also was a questionable decision. And I just thought Kevin Burkhardt on Fox said it best. Kevin Burkhardt, the play-by-play guy, when they kept going to, I think it was Dean Blandino, about the different calls and rulings. And he was saying, like, are we really talking about millimeters here when we're judging this on slow-mo? He's like, how ridiculous is this? And I think everyone could identify with him. And he was talking about both ways. Early in the game, Sirianni was furious with the refs over, I guess there was a whistle that went off during the play when the ball was in the air for Jake Elliott's missed field goal from 58 yards. And technically the rules say that you're supposed to replay the down if that happens during the flow of a play. But then the referees said, well, yeah, we don't know where the whistle came from, so we're not going to do that. We're not going to follow that rule. And so granted, I guess that means that none of the referees blew the whistle, but Sirianni had the Eagle, I've never seen a team spend more time standing on the field. Like he had the offense or the special teams, like the field goal unit, essentially waiting out close to the numbers for almost 10 minutes as they were trying to figure that out, because he really felt like, I'm in the right here. So kind of a weird game, oddly officiated game. The officials today, even when they made calls, they were they would constantly huddle and confer and not just make the call. Like the referee was always like double checking things, taking a while. It was sloppy. It was sloppy. But, I think it's important to remember, even if those frustrations on certain calls are valid, it's important to remember, like what Dart said, I think is the truth, which is like the Eagles dominated the Giants today. This is now a tough, catastrophic choke job loss in Denver, followed up by a dominant, out physical loss on the road against your biggest rival. And that's my takeaway from the game. And I think that should be everybody's takeaway from the game about where this goes from here and what's the mood and state of the team, is that the quarterback now understands where it can go and what it's like around here when this type of stuff happens and you can't stop it from snowballing. And he is now trying to say, we got to do something about this. But that's the question. And that was the thing I brought up after the Denver game, and that I brought up, even, going into and during and after that Philly game. Is kind of the idea was Jackson has some promising things going on, but can he stop this? Can he really change it? Is it enough with this coaching staff? Is it enough with this roster? Is it enough with this general manager running the show? And I think that's the question. Thanks so much for being here. We got a bunch of super chats in the queue. DeBaum checks in with $2. Thank you so much. Joe Lopez says, Pat, have you heard anything about Gruden being interested in the Giants job when they finally clean house? It sounds like Gruden's interested in, having conversations with anyone who's interested in him, I would think. Although, given the litigation ongoing that he has with the NFL, I know when I talk to people, I think the expectation is more that he would end up in college than that he would end up in the NFL. But that doesn't mean the NFL is off the table. But that is people's feeling, especially with the money that's getting thrown around in college now. And there's a huge game of musical chairs, as you guys know, occurring in college already, with even, existing coaches on different staffs. Rumors flying around about who's moving where at these big programs, people already getting fired. The game of musical chairs has already begun with those big programs in college, and the money has never been bigger there. And so I wouldn't hold your breath on Gruden, even coming to the NFL, let alone coming to the Giants. But I'm not saying it's off the table, but it just people seem to be skeptical that would be the case. That's just the latest, though. Candyman says, Pat, please tell me Mara will clean house. I mean, 5-20 in your last 25 games. Like, what are we doing here? And that's, listen, I feel really bad for Cam Scatterbo, and it's frustrating to see. But the context of all of this, remember, you can talk about officials, you can talk about injuries, but every team deals with the BS of bad calls and injuries that cost you key players. I mean, like one thing that's interesting is some of the injuries to the Giants secondary that hurt them in this game, obviously, like Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland not playing, and then Cordell Flott going out. It's when you look on the field, you think to yourself, interesting. This kind of looks like the secondary that the Giants had when they went to the playoffs in 2022 with a different defensive coordinator and different defensive staff. That's interesting, right? So, like, what excuses are we really making here? There is some talent on this roster, better talent than there was that season, but not nearly enough either to adequately compete consistently at a high level. Defensively, big concerns. The run game, and Dan Orthside also checks in with a super chat. Thank you, Dan. The run defense is a major concern because, again, it's like Groundhog Day. Dexter Lawrence had a quote, and he and Bobby Okereke both talked about how the Eagles attacked, the edges and the full run defense, which is true, right? It is true that that's what they did. But, when I had heard Dexter say, it's frustrating, we have to do better as a whole, as a unit, and it's not just the front guys who stop the run, it's everybody. It's the collective whole who stops the run, and we didn't get the job done. I hate hearing that stuff because it's the same stuff with Andre Patterson, the defensive line coach, and you saw him talking to Brian Dable on the sideline. And I already know, watching that conversation happening on the sideline, the context of what's going on there. And it's, hey, let's make the head coach. This is what I'm telling you. This is my opinion on what I hear when I hear people like Lawrence say stuff like that. It's Groundhog Day because we've already been here when the defensive line coach and, the head coach is not blaming the defensive line coach, and the D line coach is talking about, and this happened, right? Remember when Martindale was here, it's like, oh, it's the corners on the outside. It's the edges, right? It's anybody but the interior defensive lineman. Well, Dexter Lawrence needs to play better. He needs to make more plays. Brian Daboll said he's getting double teamed a lot. He's always gotten double teamed a lot. And the finger pointing has to stop. This idea that it's always somebody else's fault. This is the problem, along with the constant losing here. This is the problem with this regime and this operation. It's always the fault of people who they prefer to be blamed and scapegoated. It's never like, just evaluate what you're watching on the field and in the games and make a judgment or make an adjudication, make a decision, call it for what it is, and stop pointing fingers. Stop pointing fingers. Do your job. And for John Mara and Steve Tisch and Chris Mara and Tim McDonald and anybody else who runs this franchise, stop letting these petty finger pointing and lack of accountability conversations happen on your watch. Stop being the organization that allows people to constantly skirt blame and enable that behavior, because what it does is it keeps the culture bad. It keeps it sour. It keeps the wrong people in the high positions, and it continues to drag you down to the depths of the NFC and the NFC East, which is where you are right now. Boomer says, are they more likely to buy or sell at the deadline? Well, right now the Giants are desperate. Their GM and their head coach are desperate. So buying is still on the table because they're 2-6. And even though they're in last place, they're in a position where first of all, they have Jackson Dart, their young, franchise quarterback on the field. And you want to, just from a pure competitive standpoint and development standpoint, you want to help him as much as you can. And you've now lost essentially his two top weapons for the season. Even though Scadaboo didn't start the season as the starter, it's Neighbors and he are their two top weapons. And then on top of that, their jobs are on the line, right? Their next year, the final year of the GM and the head coach's contracts, and they need to show progress. They can't afford to have the bottom fall out. I mean, it was so funny hearing Tom Brady at the end of the game saying, yeah, quitting is a disease and the Giants aren't quitting today. And that's what I love about it. Meanwhile, Tank Bigsby is carrying the ball as Tom Brady is talking 9 times for 104 freaking yards. All right, Tom. Thanks, Tom. Saquon Barkley, 14 attempts for 150 yards and a touchdown. Tank Bigsby, 9 for 104. Jalen Hurts, 15 of 20, 179, 4 TDs. Dallas Goedert with 2 touchdown catches. Dotson and Barkley with with a touchdown catch apiece. And so, yeah, Boomer, I mean, selling wise, who are you selling if you're the Giants right now? And if you're selling, I guess the attractive, valuable pieces on your team are guys like on the defensive front, I guess. I mean, Dexter is not the same player he usually is. He obviously needs to get healthier and be in his typical game shape. But I think Kayvon Thibodeau, with Abdul Carter on the team as the number 3 overall pick, and then Brian Burns as well, making what he's making, that's a surplus at a position. They don't really have a surplus at any other position, but ideally the Giants would like to be winning with those guys and then not selling off at all. So I'm not saying they are, but I'm just, the idea, like when you talk about them being sellers, the names that have come up over the last couple of weeks of like Evan Neal, Devin Singletary, Jalen Hyatt was a healthy scratch today. Like, you're not getting anything of value with these guys. And now with Scadaboo out, you're not looking to deal a Singletary anyway. If anything, you need another running back now. So I'm not exactly sure what you're selling. Buying wise, though, obviously receiver and running back, corner as well. But I mean, how much can you turn this around? How much does adding that one player at one of those positions turn this around? Like that's a big question right now. We've talked about the receivers, obviously, that would be available, but all right, let's see. Thank you for that, Boomer. Jimmy says, too many collapses like Denver, like Dallas. This team has more talent than its record. Has to fall on the coach at some point. Yeah, I think there are issues with the talent as well as the coaching. Definitely, though, the management of the games is stares you in the face as far as not being sufficient. And like you don't have to be okay with 5 wins in 25 games. Like at some point, you need to tell yourself. So to Jimmy's point, okay, if the Giants had a better coach with the same GM, they still wouldn't be a good team. But to Jimmy's point, there are, you could count up, let's say 5 games over the last couple of years that maybe you get a win in because you have somebody who just knows how to manage a game. Denver, Dallas. Think of that Jets game back when Martindale was still the defensive coordinator with DeVito at quarterback, managing that late game scenario. Like, the kicker situation, and that goes all the way up to Joe Shane with the roster with Brian Dable, in the Washington game, Chiefs game, et cetera. You can go around and find with better management, no, this still isn't a really good team, but it's a team that isn't, completely coughing up even some games where you thought you were seeing some progress. So I would push back on that with a different coach. This is immediately a really good team that's talented enough and fine. But I do agree with you that they've lost a good handful of games on the margins that a better staff would win. D-Kid says the officiating was egregiously bad. This is not an excuse because the Eagles did not need the help. Call it like it is, Pat. It was bad. I expect the Giants to get an apology letter from the league. D-Kid, it was bad. But like I said, it was, I was just telling you what I saw here, during the game as far as how it played out. Like I said, if I'm the Giants, it's hard for me to understand the tush push one, even though, like I said, I could see them ruling forward progress running out even before I heard the whistles. But again, on that play, is Hurts down? No, he's not. Is he reaching forward? Yes, he is. Does the ball get punched out as everyone's still pushing and moving and playing? Yes. So that's a really difficult one to understand. And the pass interference one was tough too. I mean, yeah. No, I mean, I think anecdotally, like listening to some of the fans here and watching the reactions of some of the fans in the stadium here, like I think the Eagles fans were surprised by those calls too, to be honest with you. But I also thought the Dart one getting overturned from a fumble to an incompletion was weird too. And that's what I'm saying is just overall, I just thought the officiating was bad. And yes, those 2 calls were hard to understand. But again, as you said, no excuse. Like Jackson didn't even mention the refs. He said, like, we got dominated in this game, and that's, so you take the official to, turn those calls over, say maybe the game's closer. But if you're giving up, 8-9 yards a carry on the ground, you're getting pushed around, right? So, but yeah, no disagreement, D-Kid, on the officiating being questionable. As long as Dart continues to progress, do you see the Giants getting rid of Dable, says Deb. I think we are in a catch-22, and they keep Dable. Deb, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't think they're in a catch-22 at all. I mean, if they're okay with continuing to lose games, then they can run it back. But there's a better way. There's a better way. to your point, it really only matters what a handful of gentlemen think as they sit around the room. And now Julia Koch is in that room, even though she's a minority owner, but now there's another voice in that room. So you also have to think about financial stability, the stability of the franchise, the optics, which is something that governs every decision that the Giants make as a franchise, and especially with this regime, how they make decisions. So those all play a factor, and there's more at play here than just wins and losses, even though it really shouldn't be that way. But I honestly, I've said this before, Deb. After them running it back, coming off of 3-14 last season, I've lost my compass on exactly where the Giants draw the line on what their standard is. Their standard is much lower than it used to be. John says nothing has changed past 10 years on the defensive side. Teams always attack the second level the most. At what point will GMs address the inside linebacker position? Not a fan of Bobby O. Micah is always hurt, and Muasal is not good. Yeah, I was disappointed in Muasal today. Made a couple plays, but especially on that slant to Goddard where Newbin's in coverage, and Muasal looks like he's coming over to make a hit, make a play, and he just does like a flyby. I mean, I don't know what that was. But Muasal's a good example of and even, not to pick on him for any reason, but Muasal, Dane Belton, these are guys who, and I'm not just saying the Giants, I'm just saying in the NFL in general, so other teams too. When you play backups as starters, they end up getting exposed at some point, and sometimes it happens consistently depending on the game and the matchup because they're backups playing as starters, and Muasal's a good example of that. Is Bowen being kept around because he's a yes man, says Boomer Sooner? It's certainly not because of his pedigree or performance. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that it's being done so that he can be the scapegoat at the end of the year instead of anybody else. It's possible that, definitely it seems like Brian Daboll, I think, is trying to clean up his reputation as essentially like an assistant coach or coordinator killer. Somebody who over the years people have, plenty of people have either not wanted to work for anymore or who he has scapegoated and the organization has scapegoated. So definitely coming off the Denver game and then there's an element of that. And then there's also partially what Bowen said himself after the Denver game, which was like, we're all in this together, whether we sink or we swim here, it's all of us. And I think it's possible that is just, it's as simple as that. And it's as simple as, Daboll doesn't have the capital internally now really to make that kind of change anymore. And everyone understands that it's like we're either going to succeed together and we're all going to stay, or we're going to lose together and we're all going to go. So there's various options of where that stands right now, but certainly not looking good. And really internally, there's no obvious great option to replace Shane Bowen. I mean, he actually was bringing, to my eye, watching the game, he was bringing a lot more pressure than the Giants usually do in this game. They didn't get to Jalen Hurts enough, and they couldn't stop the run. Boomer Sooner says Dart needs a weapon for his development. Forget wins. To Baum also says Dirtball Bawn hip dropped Scattaboo, no flag. Well, I know what you're saying about hip drop. I think to its eye, I could tell though Scattaboo kind of went like this to Bawn and the Eagles as he was driven off. It didn't look to me like he was blaming anyone for anything. I'll be interested to see if the NFL says something about that. What I remember is that it was like they both fought for the ball as it arrived, and then Bawn tried to tackle him down because they were kind of, Scattaboo reached up and Bawn reached up from behind and then tried to tackle him down. So yeah, it ended up looking like one. I know hip drops eventually, basically they don't call it in the game. What they do is they send it to the league, and if the league determines that it was a hip drop, then the guy gets fined for it, and that's how they deal with it. So, we'll see where that goes. Obviously devastating, but no one said that after the game, I guess, is the point I was gonna make there. But certainly we'll be interested in what they say. And you said Dart needs a weapon. Yeah, the question is then, like, what weapon do you go get? Like, do you go get a Chris Olave? Is a guy like Rashid Shaheed or Dontavian Wicks of the Packers or some deep threat? Like, is that enough? I mean, they have Ray McLeod. I would think he would probably enter the fray next week. Um, at the earliest against the Niners. We'll see about that. Maybe that provides a little bit of juice. Um, a guy like Jacoby Myers to me just doesn't feel like I don't know. He's in the final year of his deal, I believe. Older player, like a rental. Is that really what you're doing for Jackson Dart? How much does that help you? What are you giving up as an asset for that? Um, you know, So it's a question of, okay, first of all, how much do you want to spend if it's a huge weapon that you're acquiring? You don't want to give up too much, and you also don't want to, for next year, let's say, acquire a number one who needs to be paid like a number one when Malik is coming back, is going to need to be paid the following year, plus Slayton under contract, all those things. But then again, you can't just sit on your hands. You don't want the bottom to fall out, and you want Jackson to have weapons too. So fair point. All right, let's get into the queue here. Joel says we are cursed with this team. Peterstown says, Pat, when is enough enough? Time to clean house no matter win, lose, or draw. The time has come because these guys are not even playing for pride anymore, and that is, my friend, all coaching. Reminder, everybody, by the way, my bookie, hooks, rubs, and spices, Boom Chaga, Mushroom, Super Drink, and Salaretta for Men are our sponsors. For the next few minutes, I will throw those codes up there. It's my bookie is the sports book where you can tail my picks. Boom Chaga is Talking Ball 25 at boomchaga.com, and Hooks, Rubs, and Spices at hooksrub.com. Talking Ball is the code, 20% off now. Got that new pepper sauce, that hot sauce there. Go get it today. And reminder on my bookie obviously as an offshore compared to some other sports books, depending on where you live, you might already be signed in and be loyal to a certain sports book. But for those of you watching and viewing and listening to this podcast around the country, no matter where you live, my bookie is available to you. So if you live in a state with different laws where you don't have as many options, my bookie is exactly the kind of sports book for you. So go check it out. It's mybookie.ag. You can play all the odds. It's got a great casino, WWE and UFC. It's the best place to bet those. NBA season now underway, as well as NHL and MLB still going with the World Series. And obviously NFL all season long. Props, great props. You'll get, I think it's a bonus match with my code, Leonard. So go check out my bookie today. All right. Walker Wash says Banks, Nubin, and Muasau are always out of position. Make a play. And we need playmakers. They should have gotten rid of the tush push since they can't officiate it correctly. 100% was a fumble. All right. Coach Hayward Bay, like Darius Hayward Bay. Oh, sorry. I missed one right before you. I'll get right to you. Boomer Sooner said, what is the most likely outcome for the staff and front office? I mean, if you were placing odds on it on my bookie, let's say, I think the odds would be Joe Shane stays and Brian Daboll and the staff are out. But, it's all about, does the bottom fall out here, right? Do they finish this season with 2 or 3 wins? Do they finish it with 6 or 7? I think that's probably, where the coach's fate lies. And, maybe where the GM's fate lies, but the Giants historically like to, blame coaches and stick with the front office a little bit longer than they should. So that's their history. I personally think, however, you need to start fresh. What letter grade would I give Joe Shane overall? I would give him an F. I think that the Giants lose consistently. They lose most of their games, and it's because of a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is because they're usually not the more talented team on the field. I believe that the reason Shane is still here is that the organization has lowered its standard on what it means to be competitive. And I believe that I think if you give anybody enough of a runway and you let them win 3 or 4 games a year and they keep getting high first round picks, eventually you're going to have a little bit more talent on your team than you used to. But I don't think that's a recipe for success. So that's my take. Coach Hayward Bay says, help me understand how Shane goes under the radar with these moves and lack thereof. I'm talking about Julian Love, McKinney, etc. Yeah, not under my radar, as you can see, just gave him an F. But I think that's a great point by you, too, that I just kind of overlooked in my breakdown there. And this is something that, the players see and have seen throughout the years. And you could go and talk about Love, McKinney, Saquon, Leonard Williams. And then obviously there's guys like, look at Daniel Jones right now. I know Daniel, by the end, it felt like he wasn't the guy for them anymore, but look at what he's doing in Indianapolis right now. And the common thread with Shane's mistakes is that you almost have to think of it. Sometimes it almost feels like he's staring at a spreadsheet and all he's thinking about is positional value, average contracts, the market, right? The market. Like, let's talk about abstract, business ideas when it comes to building a roster, while ignoring, in your point here, Coach Hayward Bay, I think is what you're getting at. Not only are they, let's say, overlooking that it's important to retain a good player, but also what they're doing is they are completely ignoring or missing the impact on the locker room when they let players like that out. And that is the key part of why this team has struggled. And that's when I was talking about like the defensive line, not being accountable with some of those comments and the D-line coach not being accountable with some of those comments. This is what I'm talking about. It's like it matters who is leading your team and what behaviors and comments and attitudes you're allowing to seep in, who you're listening to, who you enable, who you retain, who you fire, who you hire. All of that contributes to it. And when you show the locker room what you value, and it's not the same things that they value in those players from an intangible standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, from a team chemistry standpoint, and from a production standpoint, the team starts to lose faith. That's what happened last year, 3-14. They completely just did not have enough leadership. And this year they've tried, but in my opinion, Shane doesn't really know what leadership looks like. I think you can see that by him throwing all of his eggs in the basket with Russell Wilson. Like, Russell Wilson talks the game, but it doesn't seem genuine a lot of the time, and he doesn't back it up. And, I think what Wilson and Jameis gave them this offseason, and Jameis is, leading internally and doing all those things. So it's not like there's not some leadership going on there, but I felt like they were more optics-driven decisions by the organization to bring people in who would make things look better without really recognizing that it wouldn't actually make the team better, if that makes sense. Now, you guys know I think Jameis would give them a better chance to win than Russell did those first 3 weeks, but I'm just using the Russell Wilson, let's follow this guy example to illustrate to answer your question, Coach Hayward Bay, of what Shane misses when he makes these decisions. Good question. Into says, I was not a fan of the Burns trade. You make that move when you're a pass rusher away, but I genuinely feel bad for the guy that his prime years are going to be wasted here if Shane Ball stays. Yeah, he was going into today, was tied for the NFL lead in sacks. He's having a good season. Right now he's banged up. At the moment, it was a desperate move. It was a move like at that time, they felt like Thibodeau wasn't the guy that they had drafted him to be, like at the level that they wanted him to be. And you're right. They made it at a time where you're thinking that's a finishing move by a team. And that this is, Joe Shane has acknowledged that he completely misevaluated where they were as a team, coming off the playoff season. And then they get, and this is why I pointed out to you that the Giants still could make a move now when it comes to, let's say, acquiring someone at the deadline. And yes, like I said, it's valid from a standpoint of trying to surround Jackson Dart with something more, which, you understand that to a point, but it's also, it's desperation. Like, they're trying to save their jobs here. This isn't just about, this just isn't just about winning games as X's and O's. This is also about a general manager and a coach who are scrambling here. Boomer Sooner, another super chat. Thank you. Boomer Sooner says, regardless of the players brought in, why can the staff not develop a single player to outperform expectations? If they aren't elite, they already suck. Here's one thing I would say in answer to that, and to kind of agree with you on something. If Wink Martindale was the Giants defensive coordinator, how many sacks do you think Abdul Carter would have right now? If you think that answer is it would be the same, then that's what you think. But I think all of you, when I pose that question and I stop and I give you a few seconds to think about it, I think we all know the answer. I think we all know that Martindale would be able to scheme up plays for Carter to get free, and that his numbers would look a lot better. I think we know that. So that's a good example of what you're talking about. Daboll is like a toddler breaking all his toys and wanting new ones, says DGH. Thank you for the big super chat, DGH. They overuse their stars and they all get injured. Part of terrible and predictable play calling. A miracle if Dart doesn't get injured under Daboll. Yeah, didn't love them calling design runs with him to get crushed at the end of this game when it was already decided and they had already lost Scadaboo. Like, Daboll said something like, yeah, he's a competitor. You don't want your quarterback to get hit, referring to the amount of hits he took. But he's talking about like the hits he's taking from, on the pass rush. But it's like you're calling plays for him designed to be hit. Like, what are you doing? Only stud in our line was selected by the last regime, referring to Andrew Thomas as Jimmy. Yes, and Thomas did not have the same kind of game today either. All right. That's right, Jimmy. Yeah, it's another reason why Shane gets an F. His offensive line evaluations have been, for the most part, horrendous. I mean, their inactive list today was Evan Neal, his 7th overall pick in his first draft. James Hudson, his top signing in free agency as the O-line swing tackle this season. And Jalen Hyatt, a 3rd-round pick that he traded up for. All healthy scratches. Referee's contention that forward progress had been called and whistle blown was a flat-out lie. No, Richard, I'm just telling you that's what it did look like to me live, that they had ruled forward progress when I saw it. But again, an easy contention back to that is, but we didn't hear a whistle, That guy says, once again, who predicted over 7 wins? Yeah, right. Richard says the team is saying Scadaboo's ankle was dislocated. Yeah, and Anne Boleyn's head was dislocated. It's also that's a funny line. Also, Richard, dislocation, it's almost like it's not a harsh enough word for what it describes as far as the injury. Like, remember last fall or November when Dex dislocated his elbow? Like, when you hear that, you think, oh, that sounds painful, but it doesn't. You don't really know exactly what it means in that moment. But then apparently it cost him the ability to work out the same all off season, and he didn't practice much in the off season. And then he's not the same player now, and we're closing in on a year closer to it. So dislocated elbow, dislocated ankle, it's essentially bad for the tendons and that entire area and that entire joint. So it's worse than what it sounds like, I guess. We all saw it. I mean, we all saw the injury. But that's what Brian Daboll at one point was being asked a question about how the players were reacting, and he goes, "Did you see it?" Because it really was that bad. Run defense managed to be worse than the officiating, K-Max says. Brutal. Joe says, Pat, the game was over after the first play. Giants defense could not tackle, gave up 9.8 yards rushing per carry. D-Rock says, fire the coaches. Joe says, Pat, the offense fell apart after the scat man was injured. Hooks says, just leave Bowen in Philly at this point. Dan wants Bowen fired. Alamara says, has anyone been held accountable? No, same old. They beat us in all phases from Brian Daboll. I mean, it's just insane, NYOG says, if we're not going to have Neighbors until midseason next year, draft one in the first round, especially if we can get the Ohio State receiver. Yeah, well, that's one thing about that would be one argument for trading an asset for like a strong like number one would be hedging your, kind of saying like, listen, we want Malik to be back ASAP, but how soon is he going to be back? We don't know that for a fact, right? So you can't just act like it's absolutely, clearly going to happen. Boomer Sooner says, who would Mara look to if Daboll is fired? I would think he would look to somebody with experience, which is why we've brought up Gruden's name. But I would think that you would be looking to somebody who has experience and who also can develop quarterbacks, has experience. I mean, I'm not telling you Mike McCarthy is the answer, but I'm just saying like that is one. That's the area of coaches that I would expect them to at least start at. But I'm not telling you guys Mike McCarthy would be the next coach. I'm just saying, he has interviewed for it before. But I'm just saying, like, considering the inability of Daboll to manage games and the struggles, you're not looking for just like some fresh young blood, young coach who hasn't done it before. I don't think, at least I wouldn't be. Now, again, I was just using McCarthy as an example of someone who's done it before. We all know that McCarthy has had plenty of issues managing games too. So I'm not endorsing him as the guy. But I'm just bringing up, like, if I'm Mara and Tish and I start making my list, I'm looking at coaches who have done it and who understand how to put a game plan together, And obviously the league trend is to go younger and cheaper instead of with the people who have done it. All right, let's see. Yes, offense did fall apart after Scatterboo was injured. Let's see. Hook says he doesn't put the loss on Daboll. He's not my favorite, but this is more the DC and having to play the Eagles and the refs. Biff is pissed off at the refs. But we need more weapons for Dart's development. Otherwise, we will screw him up like we did with Daniel Jones. Jim says, holy moly, not on Daboll, Hooks. He's the head coach. Let's see. Hook says, yes, the defense every time. The special teams should have been better and has been good outside of field goal kicking, but defense is the overall issue. I think it's bigger than the defense, Hooks, but certainly the defense set the wrong tone for this game and was the inflection point, the center of why the Giants got out-muscled and outworked. Jim also points out, though, the offensive line collapsed. D-line and D-backs were shredded. Linebackers couldn't tackle, couldn't cover. Other than that, things were good. Right. How was the rest of the play, Mrs. Lincoln? Eagles coaches adjusted. Giants did nothing. Enough said. Alamara says Hooks Rubs pepper sauce is A1 side. So good. Nice. Hook says, Alamara, truly appreciate that, man. Had a great launch this week outside of today's game. We'll be doing a Peppa challenge at a local Ace Hardware next weekend. That's cool. Please leave a review on the site when you have a moment. Yeah, guys, please go to hooksrub.com. So Hooks Rubs and Spices, Jared is the owner and operator. He's a diehard Giants fan, so you can support a Giants fan while you're doing it. But he's got great products. It's all organic, allergen-free, or I should say not organic. It's all allergen-free, and it's delicious. Really, his different flavors are perfectly paired for whatever types of meat that you prefer to put on the grill. He's got a flavor, a rub, a spice for you. The smoke and sweetness is my favorite, but he's got something for everybody. And then this new pepper sauce he just launched this week. And I'm actually, I think, as excited about that product with Hooks as anything, because I personally love to make eggs in the morning and throw some hot sauce on it. And so I think I'm going to substitute my typical hot sauce with Hooks Rub pepper sauce and never look back. But the way you support it is going to hooksrub.com. Also follow on social media wherever you are. It's at hooksrub. And go to hooksrub.com, use the code Talkin' Ball, and you'll get 20% off. Also, great swag, great gear on Hooks Rub's website as well. So go check it out today. Joe says, Pat, did you get a memo from Fox to not look Tom Brady in his eyes and not talk to him unless he talks to you first? You know, it's funny. Like I said hi to him in passing before the game, and he said hello as he walked by. After the game, they had like 5 elevators, and we were waiting for one to open, and one finally did. And then the guy got out and he told all of us we couldn't go down and we had to wait because that elevator was dedicated for Tom Brady. And then we waited, and Brady, didn't show up while we were there. We ended up getting on one of the other elevators like 4 minutes later as we just stood there. There were literally like 30, 40 people waiting, and they were holding the one open elevator in case Tom Brady showed up and they could take him down solo. So that's what it's like being Tom Brady. Alex says it's not fair. He has to save the jobs of the GM and head coach when they haven't built a well-coached and talented team. Barb says this was the most insane game. Barkley fumbles. Eagles get the ball. Oh, no, you mean Hurts. Yeah. Hurts fumbles. Eagles get the ball. Slayton scores. Refs make up BS. That's a 14-point swing. Yeah, no, I mean, still would have lost with those 14 points, says that guy, but that does take away from the team spirit. It needed to be a blowout. We can't compete with anyone. Kylo disagrees with that, but that guy says, who can we compete with? We have 2 wins. You're going to count those as competing. Francis said Dark got sacked a lot. NYOG says we need to let Bowen go. Our season is over, but we need to keep the locker room and draft a receiver in the first round, especially if Neighbors won't be back until November of next year. NYOG thinks that Bowen has lost the leaders on defense and Carter should be further along than he is. Yeah, like I said, that's one thing I do believe. And, again, I don't think it's fair to scapegoat the defensive coordinator when the problems go way above him to the head coach and the general manager. But I do think, like I said, the team in general is not put in the best positions to succeed at times because of the coaching as well. And I think a great example of that is exactly what you guys what I alluded to earlier, which was like, listen, if they had a better defensive coordinator like Wink Martindale, who was here, don't you think that they would have that he would have more sacks and more production? Skipping around here on the comments, Collusion says, I don't trust this organization to build around Dart. What an awful Sunday. Prayers to Scattaboo, who has become one of my favorite Giants. Johnny says, we'll know for sure if the Giants are broken at the top. If Shane stays and Daboll goes, this regime needs to get fired as a tandem. I agree. Let's see. Boomer says, my only worry with Lane Kiffin is he will use the Ole Miss offense rather than more complex NFL concepts, so his Dart won't develop. The Giants have been using Ole Miss's offense, though. I wrote a story about in the Daily News a couple weeks ago. They have obviously their own offense as well, and it's all kind of mixed in together. So they are not, it's not just the college offense, but Jackson Dart definitely put his imprint and his fingerprint on this offense with concepts and calls from the Ole Miss offense that Brian Daboll and Kafka then incorporated to try to make him more comfortable. And so they're already using a lot of those. Carter or Coach D says Abdul Carter is afraid. He can't hit for a third overall edge rusher. He's afraid to hit. I don't give defensive rookies who are afraid to hit a rookie pass. His pressure stat is fake. Interesting. Well, I do think in general, players at this level, it's like you just got to finish at some point. Like that was what Kayvon was saying in general about the team. Your boy Javi says the Koch family isn't used to losing. Giants need to let them be majority owners. It's time for a new day. Interesting. Looks like some of you were going to let's see. Oh, some of you were suggesting some coach names. Yeah, in these moments like this, like I'm not ready at this point to just throw out a bunch of names. I see Boomer saying Bill O'Brien. Mark suggested Lane Kiffin. Yeah, I just think you want professionalism in how you run this team. Matthew says, Pat, do you think Dexter Lawrence could be traded? He is not the same player since the elbow injury, and he probably has some value. So there's a player who would have value. But then again, think of the message you send to your team if you do that, right? Are you signing your own death certificate, hypothetically speaking, or, metaphorically speaking, as Joe Shane and Brian Daboll, to be getting rid of a player like that? Because part of the way the Giants got into this is by getting rid of good players and players who the team knew were important to what they were doing on the bottom line. So if you trade Dexter Lawrence this year, you save a boatload of money in upcoming seasons like you would. According to overthecap.com, which is the site I use, the only site I use for cap, in 2026, you would save $20 million and it would be 6.9 in dead money. And then it would be 22 million in savings in 27 and 6.9 in dead money in 27 as well. So, you could get out from it. Now, Dex is 28. He's the center. He's one of the centerpieces of your team. I mean, no doubt that's exactly the kind of player who, if you got rid of him, you would, he'd do like the Daniel Jones Saquon thing and like immediately win a Super Bowl with his next team. That feels like one of those situations. I don't disagree with you though, that like this is a player who, for whatever reason this year, not at the same conditioning level, not playing the way that you're used to seeing him play. And if you're the Giants long term, you listen to everything, you ask about everything, right? So Milan Fan Club says after week 8, the past 3 seasons, 2-6 in 2023, 2-6 in 2024, 2-6 in 2025. Brian Daboll knows how to do one thing: lose. Joe says they need new everything, including scouts. Dart might demand a trade to the Vikings. They need a QB. Francis said, valid point. With today's game, Dart saw the frustrating future of fighting adversity without game day execution. Very well said by Francis there in kind of summarizing the point I was making earlier about Jackson's takeaway today. Dan says, my super chat didn't go through all the way. Anyways, Daboll and Shane, tick, tick, tick. Dart is what? I don't follow that, Dan. Why do you think Dart is classless? Why do you think that? I don't follow that. John says even Tom Brady said this game was called horribly. Yeah. Yeah, right. Exactly. All right. Yeah, those look like older comments anyway. All right, let's see. Let's finish up with some questions. If you guys want to squeeze any more questions in, drop in a super chat or super sticker. We'll be getting out of here soon. Looks like some of you are going around the league too. So E-Man brings up John Harbaugh if the Ravens let him go. Certainly, yes, that would be an experienced option if the Ravens get rid of Harbaugh, which is not out of the question. That would be a name to consider. Buckshot says nothing wrong with Abdul Carter. He has played well. Dart still shines. Being beaten. Bowen should be fired, but who are you going to get midseason? Most likely an interim DC running some plays until a reboot. We got a super chat into the queue here. Keith Wilson says, when I saw Cam Scadaboo's ankle, I cried because it seemed like it's always season-ending injuries for us. For too long, it feels like I'm watching for development and not just to win the game. How many seasons of this? Yeah, it is devastating. And Scadaboo's injury is devastating. And like I said, he's had ups and downs just like rookies have, right? You had the pass pro on the interception in Denver. You had the fumble in New Orleans. But he had 7 touchdowns, including this touchdown today, the touchdown catch from Jackson Dart. And it was the play of Scadaboo, including the 3 TDs against the Eagles in week 6. But it was also, as Slayton called it, he said like he has a unifying spirit about him and energy. And, he was, part of the soul, the new kind of evolving soul of what the Giants were. And from a standpoint of selling themselves as being back, right? The Dart Scadaboo dynamic, the dynamic duo of that, them being partners in crime, them getting the Giants in the end zone, the whole thing feeling a little bit more fresh. Scadaboo doing the Ric Flair scream, like that was all. Even with the Giants starting on an 0-3 record, like once Dart and Scadaboo got into there, and you started hearing that and seeing that, it just added a little bit of fresh air to everything. And even for the Giants as a team, how they play and attack their opponents. And so it's devastating on a lot of different levels. And Keith, to your point, you're tired of hearing, hey, how are these guys going to develop for the future? What's the plan? And that's the thing that annoys me about this regime and why and how ownership enables, especially the Shane part of it, but all the way down to Daboll, is they just constantly move the goalpost. It's like, oh, this is the year we're going to be good. Oh, wait, we stink. But that was never the plan. The plan was always for the future. And look, we have the number 3 or number 5 or number 7 or whatever it is overall pick. And we're number 6. And now we're going to get another good player. Look how much better the roster is. Well, it's kind of a little bit better because you stunk and you had a high pick. But now, let's look at our draft in year 1. Look at how great our draft picks are in year 2. Wait a minute. Maybe it's not so great in year 3. Actually, that wasn't a good draft, right? Like it's the same. It's the same. It's on repeat. It's Groundhog Day. Dope Des says, as we talk about decks, you see we don't have patience and we lose good players. That's the thing. I don't disagree with, hey, this guy's not getting it done. Is this a name you need to think about? Oh, what could you get for him? From a standpoint of this, like the Giants, they don't have a lot of players on their team that are going to get them a ton. But again, I'm agreeing with you, which is this idea of, it's like, well, wait a second though. You don't get better by getting rid of good players. Like that's just in general, you do not get better by getting rid of good players. And if anything, that's the kind of move that like the next GM and coach make in the offseason to press the reset button completely rather than like these guys cutting their own legs out from under them by saying like, let's get rid of a guy who, when he's healthy and at his top shape, is essentially our best player. So, I'm not sitting here advocating for trading Dexter right now, but I am agreeing with the premise of bringing it up as like, hey, is this a name to potentially look at down the road because we're not getting out of him what we need to, and we're a team that needs so much more, but no, I don't think they're going to do that. No. Johnny says, hey, Pat, what's Shane's rep around the league? If he's actually kept, do we really have a shot at a good veteran head coach? That's a great question. I personally don't think so. I think if you do get a veteran head coach with Shane, it would be somebody who's desperate for a job, who's not going to get another one. Shane's reputation is as somebody who thinks that he's the smartest person in the room and who has, as you've seen from the Nick Gates story that I told and the Nick McLeod story that ESPN reported last year, has rubbed plenty of people in the agent world and the player world and around the league the wrong way. He is a first-time GM who has learned on the job and learned on the fly and has made plenty of mistakes. And I do not personally think that there are people lining up to work with him. That would be my answer. Boomer says, I don't see a scenario where Dable stays. I don't personally either. I just have lost my compass on exactly what the Giants even think is okay or not. I mean, because last year was just insane. Denver is absolutely killing the Dallas Cowboys right now. Indianapolis also putting it to the Titans. Daniel Jones today, 21 of 29, 272 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Jonathan Taylor, 12 carries, 153 and 2 touchdowns. Putting it on the now essentially tanking Tennessee Titans. Boomer Sooner says, I assume what we saw in Hard Knocks was accurate. Yes, correct. Guys, this has been an amazing chat. Remember, we are brought to you by MyBookie, by Hooks, Rubs, and Spices, by Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, and by Salaretta for Men. You can go watch my arrivals in my Salaretta gear over on Instagram, on YouTube Shorts, on TikTok, and you can see all the Giants arrivals: Jackson Dart, Cam Scattaboo, everybody else. And then MyBookie, the code is Leonard. That's where you want to go make all of your plays. Football, World Series, NBA is back, NHL is back, WWE, UFC. And like I said, some of you might live in a state where you already have an established sports book that you love using, but especially if the laws in where you live don't give you many options, MyBookie is the place for you. So go check it out, mybookie.ag. The code is Leonard. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. Gives me a little kick. It also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. I have a friend who likes taking it before his basketball games, gets him feeling juiced up and wired and also feeling fresh. There's a lot of different positives and benefits from it. Also, they also make cold teas as well. Go to boomchaga.com. Use the code TalkinBall25 today to get a 25% discount on the subscribe and save option. Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. Like I said, hooksrub.com, 20% off with the code TalkinBall for Hooks, Rubs, and Spices. They got that new pepper sauce. Get it today. And Salaretta for Men in Midland Park, New Jersey, Bergen County. Go there. Tell them that Pat Leonard sent you. Whether you're going to a wedding, a formal event, or just trying to look fresh, go to Salaretta's. They can hook you up with anything. Again, go to Salaretta for Men in Midland Park in Bergen County. Tell them that Pat sent you. All right. Let's see. Dable needs some high-dose Boom Chaga, says D-Rock. Hook says, thank you. Thanks, chat. Safe travels. And Richard Simeon says, thanks, Pat. Have a good evening. Richard says, thanks, Pat. Watching this podcast has become a post-game ritual for me. Tiger Metal Stack, no trivia tonight, but we will this week when we do our next Talking Ball Live, which stay on social media for my next update on when my Talking Ball Live is going to be this week, because what I've noticed is my personal schedule has been crazy. And so like last week during the week, the only one I did was like a Friday afternoon just because things are moving all around. So I might end up doing this week's, let's say on like Tuesday night or Wednesday night or a night that I usually don't do it. But just stay tuned to all my social media, and we will rock with a Talking Ball Live, at least one during the week this week on my YouTube channel. PL on NFL is the handle. Subscribe. Also, guys, check out my my link to all of my Talking Ball swag we got going on. The Shopify link is on my YouTube channel. We got winter beanies. We got a hat. We got a T-shirt. We got a sweatshirt. Go get it today. I think you guys will like it a lot. Evolution says, I don't think it's a Dexter problem. It's a Bowen problem. Yeah, no. Evolution. First of all, Dexter's not playing that well. So that's true. Okay. Secondly, I'm not blaming Dexter Lawrence for all of the defense's problems. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that he, just like everybody else, is not doing enough about it. But like it goes even above Bowen. It goes to the GM and the coach. That's how I feel. But Dex just came up in a conversation about, hey, trade block, what can you get value from? Are the Giants in rebuild mode versus compete mode? All those things. So that's kind of what we were talking about. But like I said, I don't think they're doing that, but I do think you need more out of Dexter. Biff Tannen says Doug Peterson should coach us. Looks like what you've been saying. Boomer Sooner notes that Dexter's interviews have been strange. I agree. And like I said earlier, Rich, who was it? Evolution. Dexter's quote is the thing that got me, where he said the run defense is not just the front, it's everybody. It's just, I've seen this movie before where the run defense stinks, and then Dre Patterson literally said on the record 2 years ago, or was it last season, that like the corners were the reason for their bad run defense, and it wasn't on the D line, and the D line was doing fine. And it's like, you just can't have people like that stabbing people in the back in the organization and pointing fingers. Like, is it true that the edges need to do a better job, both the edge rushers and the corners and the safeties and the linebackers at stopping the run? Yes, of course. But the D line is a part of it. Is absolutely a part of it. The D line is absolutely a part of it. Dexter Lawrence is a part of it, and they have to do their job better. And I just don't like hearing that stuff. Like the name Doug Peterson, Biff. Like it. D-Rock says Dex is checked out. All right, guys, this was a really good chat. Thank you all for being here. If you missed the full chat, I'll post it on, you'll be able to listen on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. And as I said at the start of this show, I think the primary takeaway today, obviously Scadaboo's injury was really difficult, but it was Jackson Dart noting that the Eagles dominated the Giants, that he's tired of the losing, that he's not going to stand for it, and that they need to do something about it. But to me, today is the day that Jackson Dart, here it is, October 26th, 2025, the day that Jackson Dart officially became a Giant and recognized what the culture and the level of acceptance of losing can be in an environment like this, with a franchise like this, if he doesn't push back, if they all don't push back, and also can probably see the writing on the wall that with the injuries and the fact that guys are slumping their shoulders and they're giving up 276 rushing yards, that there may only be so much that he can do, right? So with that, thank you so much. Talking Ball Postgame Live with Pat Leonard. See you guys next time. Thanks for being diehards. Thanks for being here. Hit those like buttons, hit those subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.